not have been good. Okay, back to check layers. Sorry for the, we missed the very first part of this lecture, but nonetheless, you'll hear it in many others. So, but this is the beginning of how to actually use the check layer. So this is going to be our color check layer that we're going to have to fix. So again, I've got the two layers, the color fill, the color check layer and the hue saturation to amplify it so we can really sort of see what's going on. But I've selected the figure that I'm actually going to do this work on. I'm going to add now an adjustment layer. So click on your adjustment layer flyout, and we are going to add a color balance layer to this. So click on that, a window will open up. You can see what color balance is in the properties panel. This is where we're going to actually do the work in this. However, you need to reset two things, and this is going to be true of every check layer adjustment that you end up making. The first one is that you need to clip this layer to the figure below it, because we only want to change the color of the figure. We don't want to change the color of the background. We want to just adjust the color of the figure so that it matches the background. If I don't clip this to the body, I'm just going to change the color of everything, and the imbalance will still be there. So again, to actually do this, we need to clip this adjustment layer to the figure. You can use the little box that's at the bottom of the properties panel, the little box that's got the arrow down that's got a cross through it that's saying this has not been clipped. You can click on that and it will actually clip it, or I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. You can hover your cursor between the color adjustment layer and the figure layer, hold down the Option key, and you'll get that same little symbol, click on it, and this is now clipped to it. So at this stage of the game now, my color adjustment will only impact the body and not anything else. So what is my problem in this? The image is too blue and possibly too cyanic as well. So I'm going to start with the blue slider up here at the top, and I need to make this warmer. So I'm going to grab the blue slider, the blue-yellow slider at the top, and I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to start to drag it to the right. And what I am looking to do is to get this to match the background. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you can already see with that slight adjustment already, this is beginning to get closer to the color that's happening in that background. So I'm going to continue to push this over slightly more. You can end up going too far with it. You can actually, you know, again, we're sort of playing this subtle game in here. But I'm liking the majority of the yellows that are beginning to happen in here. I'm also picking up a little bit of green in here, but I've got a little bit of that green in the background as well. You can try playing with your green magenta slider by taking it. I would push it a little bit more to the magenta. That actually starts to begin to mimic what's happening in the rocks and that kind of stuff. I'm feeling like this part is happening, things are a little bit better in this regard in here. So it's seeming to match a little bit better for me here. So I'm going to stick with this. If you want the same values that I've got, I had a -44 in the yellow-blue slider, and I've also got a -8 in the magenta-green slider. I don't see any cyan that I'm actually going to worry about in there, at least not right now. I do have the preserve luminosity check mark on the bottom of that because you don't want this to actually change the luminosity. However, this is a really good point here. And the second thing that I forgot to tell you about is that the blending mode of this color adjustment layer, you want it to only affect the color. So we need to change the blending mode from normal all the way down to color. And then I'm going to reset these sliders because I should have done that first. I'm going to reset these sliders and do that whole thing again just to make sure that that didn't change things too much. So I'm going to grab my yellow-blue slider, and I'm starting to pop that. Yeah, it's not going to be anywhere near as strong. And then my magenta-green slider, and I'm going to start to pump that up as well. So I ended up with a very different set of values. Instead of that amount of yellow really popping in there, I'm closer to a -24 in the yellow and a -6 in the magenta-green slider. And then turn your check layers off. And you can see what we have now done here. If you come down and turn on your eyeball for the color correction that we just did, look at the difference. Now, I don't know about you guys, but the first time I saw this, my mouth hit the floor. My mouth would hit the floor again, except I got this fucking mask on. Sorry, it just felt like I needed to vent that a little bit. But doesn't this feel like it fits more into the color space of what we've got going on in here? So the last one we're going to do is the saturation check layer. Go ahead and turn this guy on as well. And in this case, there's not anything that we can really do except for suck the saturation out of the background. So it's not really a match that I think we need to make. If you look at the saturation of her face, it's matching the background really well in this. So I don't know that there's a saturation move in this to actually make. So I'm going to leave my image at that part right there. But I do think that the brown, sort of like that warmer brown part that we brought into it, actually works better. However, if you feel like that was still too strong, go back to that color balance layer and make sure it's active and simply drop the opacity down a little bit. Maybe it needs to come down just a touch so it's not quite so evident in here. So I got mine down to like a 75%, and that seems like a much better match for me, and I'm off to the races. Did that work for everyone? Okie dokie. You can close this up. You do not need to save it in spite of the work that we did all that work. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is this Piximperfect composite. So again, this is Amish, the guy who actually does Piximperfect. These are his files. He actually does this is the thing that we're going to go through right here. However, I do a different version of it, and so I'm going to show you my version of it. It's not that it's better or worse than his. It's simply different than his. So we're going to go after this. So it's two files inside of there. One's a Photoshop file that I've already actually done the knockout for you, and the second is a street scene. If you can actually just drag across both of them and open both of them up into Photoshop. Ooh, what did that happen? So basically, you should have a street scene. I'm going to say this is Italy. It could be a gazillion places. But at any rate, that's going to be my take on it. And then a picture of a girl in a red dress on a set of railroad tracks. Everybody have this? Okay, so first things first, we're going to establish the horizon line of the street scene. So to do that, again, I'm going to go to the pasteboard to do this work. It's just easier to do it. So hit the F key to get to the pasteboard. Hit the P key to get your pen tool, and again, we're going to drag out converging lines. I'm actually going to make my image a little bit smaller because I can still see the lines that I'm looking for. So there's a line on the building, and you could trust the line on the building, although that might not really be the best lines to go for. The best lines to actually go for, I think, is going to be more the windowsill. Again, the building, the stucco-y part that's coming down on the building, it could be hand done, it could be off a little bit, whatever, but fair chance to say that the windowsills are probably pretty perfectly put in here. So I'm going to click on the top windowsill line, and I'm simply going to drag down so that I'm running along the top of the other windowsill as well. So those are the two lines that I need to actually establish this, and I'm going to go ahead and put this cursor out into my field. And then I'm going to come up and do another set, and I'm going to go after the other two windows that are on the complete other side, the other building. I'm going to click on that corner of that window, and then again drag across. So it's doing the top of both of those windows right there. So those are the ones that I'm going to go after. You can see I've got a thing that's sitting in the middle of the street, so I'm going to go up to my ruler, and I'm going to click and drag down and drop a guideline right on what the horizon line, where those two lines actually meet. Then I'm going to go to my path palette and throw away that work path because it's done its job. This is the horizon line of this image. Did that work for everyone? Yep. Good. All right, so just start all over. Go into your path palette and get rid of that path, or go back in history, either one. Okay, so click on the bottom of that top window. Yep, that corner right there. Just click, do not drag, just click once and let go. Don't drag. You don't have your rubber band showing. Click on the drop-down gear, the gear, click on rubber band so you can see it. And now drag a line down over here so that it traces the bottom of that window and matches the other bottom of the other one. Yeah, and click once. Perfect. Come back up, and we're going to do this window right here. Click on the top corner, and then click and go in that direction. And so that you're tracing the top of the windows, you need to come up a little bit right there. Click again. Perfect. And then go, your rulers aren't showing, go up to the view menu, all the way up. Come down, say rulers. Click on that ruler, and simply drag a guideline down to that intersection. Let go. Go to your path palette. You don't need to worry about any of that shit. Go to your path. Oh, okay. Go to your path palette. Throw that path away. We're going to do the same thing with the girl. So hit the F key to get off the pasteboard, because you can only have one image on the pasteboard. Hit it twice, and go to the girl image. And the girl image we probably won't need the pasteboard, but we're going to do the same thing. The P key to get the pen tool, and we're just going to do the railroad tracks. So I'm going to click and come all the way back. You don't even need to go outside of your image. You're going to get enough to actually get the cross. Put it down a point and come down and click on the bottom of the other rail and go all the way back again, tracing the rails to get that. Click one more point and drag a guideline down to where those two intersect. And you can see they intersect pretty much at the top of her head. So again, I can throw the path away. I don't need this anymore. Actually, I don't need the guide on there anymore, because I know that the horizon line for this girl is the top of her head. I can remember that part. If you go over to your channels palette, you'll see that there is a knockout of the girl already built. So I am going to first turn this girl into a smart object, because again, in doing all this transforming, in all the compositing work, we're going to transform, make her bigger, smaller, whatever, and all of that is destructive. If we make her a smart object, we can transform her 1 billion times with no destruction at all. So make this thing a smart object right now. To do that, select the background. It's the only layer you have of the girl. Up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. And you'll notice you get the little icon down at the bottom, which is exactly what we want. Then I'm going to come over to my channels palette. At the very bottom, you'll have the knockout. You don't need to select it. Simply hover your cursor over the thumbnail, hold down the command key, and click. It will load it as a selection. And then come back over to your image, to the layers palette, and click on Add Layer Mask. We've actually now got a smart object that we can actually transform back and forth and do all that kind of stuff. Great. I'm going to take the layer that is the girl, and I'm going to drag that layer on top of the Italian street. Hold down the Shift key and let go, and the girl will actually come in to my scene in the street. I'm going to click on the girl, the original one that we opened, and I'm going to just close it up and not save it. It's done its work. I've got the figure where I need it, and we should be good to go. So I think I have a big problem here in terms of perspective, and I know I do. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm actually going to move this girl up into space, and you can see I've just moved her up so she's, so I can see the whole thing. But the truth of it is, if I was going to put this girl in perspective, her head would have to be, or the horizon line would have to be right here. It would actually be right above her head where this other one was. Now, that could be the case, but I'm pretty serious. I doubt that that really is the case. But we're going to find out right now. So I'm going to scale the girl first. Temporarily, I don't want to see this guideline. Shit like this drives me nuts when I'm trying to work. So if you hit Command H, it will temporarily hide your guidelines. It'll also, if you've got a selection going, it'll hide your selections. If you hit Command H, it brings it all back. So we're not getting rid of it, we're just hiding it. So to scale the girl, I need to find something in this scene that I know how big it is. What would that be? The door. So I'm going to drag the girl up next to the door. I'm going to put her feet so they would be like right on the threshold. And again, if you guys have ever been to Europe or look at those doors are they're as tall as the ceiling in this room is right here. So it's gigantic. So we need to scale her. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Again, I'm going to click on the link between width and height. I don't even see the, oh, I do see the anchor point. I'm going to grab the anchor point and drop it right down at her feet. Again, I could transform it like it is and then move her and transform it again and move her. It's just easier to do it this way for me. It'll just shrink her right by the door. I'm going to click on the, so the link between the width and height is selected. I'm going to hover over the scrubby slider for the height, and I'm going to make her smaller. And the truth of it is, if she is next to that door, you will also notice, if you move her to the side, there is a set of doorbells right there. There's an intercom right there. I gotta figure she does not have to bend all the way over to actually speak into the intercom. So I'm guessing that my idea about where she should be right here is probably pretty close. If you want the same reduction in size, mine ended up going down to 58%. Does that look correct to you guys about? Does that seem right? Look where the door handle is. Wouldn't she be able to just reach out and grab that door handle? Wouldn't she be able to just punch the alarm button? Do you think she'd be bigger or smaller? Or does that seem right? It seems right to me as well, pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. So now we can actually, again, I can move her directly to the right or the left to actually replace her. I want to put her in the middle of my scene. So I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, hold down the Shift key so that she only moves directly to the left or the right, and I'm going to bring her back out into this space. However, I want her closer to the camera. Again, so to do that, Command H to bring up the dialog, to bring up my horizon line of the scene, I'm going to try to transform her in perspective. So I'm going to click, the girl is actually active, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Go ahead and drop the anchor point down onto the horizon line that we've actually got, the horizon line of the space. Hold down the Shift key and the Option key. This is exactly what we did with the guy standing on the seashore and the guy standing on top of the building, holding down the Shift key and the Option key. And I'm going to, because the horizon line, because it's right in the middle of her, it should bring her straight towards the camera. And I'm going to pull it up here. And that doesn't seem too bad. She seems a little bit tall to me here, but it seems like it's sort of okay. But I know it's not. I know that this is out of perspective. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and instead I'm going to move the anchor point on top of her head, which is her horizon line. Again, I've got two different ones. I'm going to end up with two different size images here. Hold down the Shift key and the Option key, and then start to bring her forward, and you can actually see, again, I don't think this is quite right. Again, I think she seems too small. She seems about the same size as she would relative to the door. I don't think this works. Command Z to undo that. I'm going to now put the anchor point right between the two. I'm going to do the average of that. Again, we're trying to do something that can't be done. Does that make sense to everyone here? So I'm looking to get the most believable with the least damage. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Option key, and I'm going to pull her forward based on that. And that seems to be kind of okay, so I'm just going to suck it up and go with that. So I'm going to hit OK for the transform. I don't want the guideline there anymore. It's done its job. I don't need it. You can actually hover over it and you'll get a little, your cursor will change to a double-headed arrow thing. You can drag the guideline back up to the rulers, or you can come up to the view menu, come down to guides, and there should be a thing. If we had a guide, it would say clear guides, and it'll get rid of it as well. So I clearly have a pretty serious mismatch here. Wouldn't you guys agree? Doesn't even look remotely believable, right? So my first thing is that I know the color is like way off. I know that there's a lot of things here that are actually way off here. But the first thing that is way off is the direction of the light. Look at the light on her face. The light on her face is coming from the right side. Do you see any lights on the right side of this alleyway? No. So we need to flip her. That's the first thing we're going to do. Up to the Edit menu, down to Transform, down to Flip Horizontal. It takes her to the other side, and already this is more believable. The light that's actually coming from those street lights onto her face, far more believable. Don't you agree? Okay. So at this stage of the game, we're going to run our check layers. So again, over to your actions palette, click on run check layers. It makes her like completely nuked out. I'm not going to actually start with again, the color first. That's just the way the action was made. Typically, I always start with luminosity, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on the luminosity check layer to turn it on. It makes my image essentially black and white. And then I need to actually try to balance the tone of this. Again, when I look at this, it's clearly too spotlit. So there's clearly a mismatch in my luminosity here. So to fix that, I'm going to select the girl, because again, I need to put my adjustment layers, I need to clip them to the girl. So I need to start with the girl in the scene, and I'm actually going to add a curve to this. And again, in the curve, because now we haven't done this before, you need to change the blending mode of this curve from normal down to luminosity, because that's all I want to do is change the luminosity. I don't want it to impact the color. And then I need to clip this to the girl. So again, either click on the little icon at the bottom of the curves property panel, or hover between the two layers, hold down the option key and click. But now when I actually change this stuff, it only changes the girl. It doesn't change the background at all. In this scene, though, the problem is that it's not just making her darker. I need to crush the highlights of this. So a lot of people would come in here and grab the center point and start to pull it down. And the problem with that is that the highlights are anchored up here at the very top. The highlights have not moved. I've only affected the midtones in here and some of the shadows. That's not going to help me here. So tear that off. Instead, grab the highlight point. Grab the point that's at the very top of your curve. Grab that point and start to pull it down. And what you'll notice now is that you are bringing down the entire luminosity of this part. I'm not going to carry this too far because I can come back and change this. But this, at least now from a luminosity point, is becoming more believable to me. There would be more fall off on the bottom of her skirt. We will deal with that later. But what I'm really trying to sense or to feel is that, does this seem to match the lighting that's up on those walls? Does it seem believable to me that this would actually be a more believable scene? And I feel like it is. If you turn your curve on and off, you'll see what a massive difference that actually made. Are we good on this part? Everyone? Okay, we can turn the luminosity check layer off, and you can see the color is still like massively off. So unlike what we did with the girl in the woods, those were easy, relatively easy changes. You could spot it just using the check layers. But the color on this girl is so radically different than the color in the background, we actually need help. There's no way we're going to turn on our color check layers and really get this to actually work. We need to actually radically change this. So this is extreme color correction. So to do that, there is a PDF that is in your layer, your session number 9. And it is extreme color matching methods. There are 2 of them. I'm going to show you the more difficult one, but also the better one. So to do this, this is what I was talking about. This is the complex part of this. But again, this shit will change everything for you. And you want to talk about going in and doing an interview for retouching and show them this? Nobody knows this shit. Okay, so to do it, you need to go to a website, and it's this website right here. If you open up your PDF, you'll actually should be able to click on this. If you can't click on that, you need to actually then just open it and copy this address and open it up into a website. So I'm opening mine up here. This is an Adobe product. It's basically how to extract colors. That's what we're basically going to do here. However, what is critical about this, you need to follow this PDF. So if, again, we look at the PDF, it says, open up this, and then in big bold letters, it says, sign into your account first. If you don't do this, you'll never be able to get this stuff in. You will be in for a world of hurt. So sign in. It's up at the very top. Again, if you take a look at the PDF, it'll point to the little areas that you actually need to get to. So again, back on my website right here, you've clicked, I've already signed into mine. Click on that little icon up at the very top. Go ahead and log into your account. I'll wait. Everybody in? Okay. Back in Adobe Color, you want to click on the Create tab at the very top, and then you want to click on the sub tab that says Extract Theme. And it's going to say, okay, you can drag and drop a file onto this. I'm going to make my screen a little bit smaller so that I can see other things. You need to go find that street file that we just used. So again, back into your session 9, inside that Piximperfect composite, you can actually find the Night Street, sorry, the Night Street. And I can see both of them, so I'm going to grab Night Street and drag it on top of that website. Oh, come on. Son of a bitch. Boom. So in this guy right now, it will actually come in and it will look at the colors in your scene and will actually try to extract them out. However, sometimes this works really well, sometimes not so well. What I feel like is actually doing pretty well, it's doing pretty well in this. I feel like I'm missing any of this tone that's actually down here in the bottom of the street part. I've got this dark, really dark, it's really it's almost the night sky. That's what I've actually got going there. And I'm not going to use that color. I'm going to replace this color. And you can click and drag these things. So I don't know, does your screen look like mine? Oh, okay. So I'm going to click on that darkest of color and I'm going to drag it down more into the corner of the street scene. So it's going to be still very dark, but I'm going to bring it down into that scale down in there. And the other things I'm actually pretty happy with in terms of it. I've got, what I'm looking for is pretty much a good range of color. So I've got something that's really dark. I've got my really yellow highlight. I've got some good midtones that are actually happening here. Personally, I like to order my colors. It's going to make it easier for the next move that we make. You can actually slide these around. So I'm going to grab the yellow color and simply drag it to the other end. I'm going to grab the darker of the browns and drag it next to the blacker of the browns, and then I'm going to drag the tan one so it goes in between. So I'm basically going from darkest to lightest color. It's just going to make our lives easier on the next thing that we do. Are we all good on this part? Okay, so this is the color palette of my scene. So I'm going to go back and look at my PDF again. I was telling Mac that I actually refer to this. Again, this is not the kind of thing that I do every single day. So I have no problem coming back and actually going through this. So we've gotten through all of this part pretty well. However, it says now set the moods to colorful, and usually that is by default what it is. So it's this side grouping over here. This can impact your colors. It really impacts what they look like, but also what gets picked. So colorful, we're still on the money. Everything is good right here. So the next thing down, again, if you need to move the sample points, move it to get shadows. So you're looking for a good representation of shadows, highlights, and midtones in all of this. And we've actually got that. We're reordering the colors. We've already done that part. So your next move is to select library. And again, take a look right here at my PDF where it says select my library. And in the Save drop-down menu, so right here, the Save to, you want to select my library. Then we're going to name our theme after the image that we created it and then hit Save. So back in our image right here, up here at the top, click on Save to My Library. The name we're actually going to do, this is called Color Theme Night Street, so that part's actually there. And then I'm just going to click on the Save button. It now says that the theme was successfully saved to my library. I'm going to say OK to that. And I'm going to go back to my PDF and say, OK, what's next? I'm going to scroll down. So now we need to go to the, we're still in that screen. You need to go to the Libraries tab and you need to select the My Library. You need to find your theme and double click on it. So I'm going to go back into my Safari. I'm going to go to Library tabs that's at the top. I'm going to open up My Library and I'm going to double click on this, which opens it up into its own window. So you should now have something that looks like my screen. Are we all good? Okay. And then I think, let me see what we're going to download this as. So yeah, we double click that part. Make sure that the window opens up and it looks just like this. Thank goodness I did the same one. And you're going to click on that download as ASE. So that's Adobe Swatch Exchange file. And when it says, what are you going to save this as? We're going to name it, again, Italian Night or whatever you want to actually name it so you know what the hell it is. So make sure that the name is the same as the source name. Well, then that's what we're going to do. So back in my Safari, I'm going to click on this download as ASE. It actually just downloaded it, and it was called Color Theme Night Street Pix Imperfect. So that's fine. I'll know basically what it is. Going back to my recipe. I know this seems complicated, but you will be happy in the end. So then in Photoshop, we are going to open up the swatches menu. It won't be visible, but we're going to open it up. We're going to click on a flyout, and we're going to actually import swatches. So go back into Photoshop. To get to the swatches menu, we don't keep this visible because we don't use it a whole lot. Go up to your window menu, come down to swatches. When you get to swatches, you can actually make it a little bit bigger. Click on the little 3 lines that represent the menu on the side. You'll get a flyout menu and come down and click on Import Swatches. This will open up and it goes to your preset. When we downloaded this, I'm fairly certain it put it in the download folder, but I'm going to find out right now. So hang on one second. Yep, it's in the download folder. And again, it's going to be whatever you called this theme, whatever you sort of named it. For me, take a look at my screen really quickly. I use this all the time. So again, we're importing the download. In this window, you can change the drop down to do the sort order of the folder that you're looking at. And if you click it by name, you got to go looking for this thing. It's sitting right here. But if you click on the drop down and do date added, then it'll always be at the very top. And you click on this and you click on open to import it. And if we scroll down to the very bottom, hopefully it will be right there. Mine is sitting right here in a folder, and I can click it open and take a look at it, and there is my color swatches inside of Adobe Photoshop. Did that work for everyone? So where did you get lost? Could you do the download? Did you download the AS or AES file?
ASE, yeah.
Okay, so hit clear out of that. We don't care about that part. Or count, hit OK. Yeah, that's coming from someplace else. So you did that part. Go back to Photoshop. You're in swatches. Click on that flyout menu. Come down to import swatches. Go to your download menu. Not to color swatches, download. And again, if you do a sort by, nope, next one over, sort by date added, it's right there. And click open, and then scroll all the way to the bottom of your swatches, and it's right there. Open up that folder, and there they are. Yep. Okay, everybody good on this? Guys, I know this seems like a lot. Again, you're going to have this PDF, and if you see what happens and you think this works, great. And if you don't, you can check this off your list and never try to do it again. Okay, I'm going to park swatches off to the side here just a little bit. I'm going to go back to look at my PDF a couple more times. This is the last tricky part of this, like if it wasn't already tricky enough. Okay, so to apply this image, what we need to do is actually create a gradient map for this. Not a gradient, but a gradient map. And this is the thing that can fuck you up. So I just want to point this out really quick. When we add this gradient map, by default, it selects the mask, and this will never work. You need to select the gradient properties to get this thing to actually work. So I'm pretty sure I know how to do this part from this point on, so this is how we're going to do it. So back into Photoshop, do this with me. Right now we've got the luminosity layer that's actually selected. I'm going to add an adjustment layer to this, so click on Add Adjustment Layer, and you want to find Gradient Map, not Gradient, Gradient Map. And a window will actually open up. Usually it opens up black and white like this. That's fine, but you'll notice that again, the layer mask has been selected. You need to click on the properties part. I don't know why Photoshop does this, but it's doing this. So what can I tell you? So at any rate, select the properties part and then click on the gradient itself, and it will open up, and you will actually have the gradient map is sitting right here. So I want to think this does get bigger, but let me just check to make sure on my recipe part right here. So we brought up in the gradient map, we selected this part, we clicked on the gradient map part, and it'll actually open up, and this is exactly what we're looking for right here. So we are now going to build the gradient map based on those colors. So back into Photoshop. The first thing we're going to do is to set our highlight color. So you will notice that at the top, has everybody got black on one side and white on the other side? Anybody not? Okay. Okay, all right. So we're going to start with the highlight part first. So you only click on the stops that are on the bottom. The ones that are on the top, you leave alone. You don't actually mess with those. So I'm going to click on the stops. Actually, maybe it'll be easier to create all the stops first. So I'm going to create all the stops first. Yeah? You didn't what?
Sorry, how did you get the gradient editor pop-up?
So you got your gradient map. Just click on this thing right here.
Oh.
That's the gradient map. I'm going to actually do this one at a time. I'm not going to do the stops. I'm not going to set them all first. It doesn't really matter how we do this. But anyway, click on the white point, the one that's actually the color stop that's all the way to the right side. We're going to click on that. It actually shows you the color in the color picker that's sitting right down here below it. It's also giving you a location of 100. Click on the color to open up the color picker, and we want to select our yellow color. So we're selecting the yellow color, and then you want to make a note of the brightness right here. You'll see that the brightness says 95%. Again, I'm going to show you this in our recipe. So we're going to click on the color. You want to look at the B of HSB for the percentage. That is the location that we need to put that on in our gradient map. So back into here, it's 95. So I'm going to say OK to this. And then in the location right here, type in 95. Then I'm going to set my black point. I'm going to do this guy next. So again, I'm going to click on the dark color stop. Again, click on the color picker. Click on the darkest color that's in the theme that we brought in. Again, make a notation of the brightness in here. It's 7%. Say OK to that. And then in location, type in 7%. Now we need 3 more stops to do the in-between colors. Simply click anywhere in here. It doesn't matter. I've just clicked, a quarter of the way in. Click on the color picker to open it up. We're going to click on that sort of next lightest of the darker colors, that sort of tannish color. Again, make a notation of the brightness. It's 25%. I'm going to say OK. In my location, I'm going to type in 25. I need to add another stop now for that medium tannish color. Again, I've just clicked underneath the gradient map. I'm going to click on the color picker, click on the color to open it up, sample that tan color. Make a note of the brightness. It says 45%. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to type in 45% for my for my location. And then finally, I've got one last one that I'm going to pick up here at the top. I'm going to click again on the color sampler point. Sorry, to open it up. Click on the second to the lightest of our color samplers. It's that sort of lighter tan. Make a notation of the brightness. It's 65%. Put that into the location and say OK. So in our luminosity layer, the gradient map that we just did, you can actually close up your swatches. You've built the gradient map right now. However, this gradient map needs to be clipped to our scene. So again, I'm going to either use the icon at the bottom of the properties palette to clip this down, or I'm actually going to, I'm just going to clip it down like that. But again, this needs to change your blending mode to only impact color. Right now it's setting to normal. You need to change this down to color. So this has now got me into the color frame in the scene. However, I think it's too strong, and that's always sort of like what happens in here. So simply drop the opacity of your gradient map down until you feel like the image actually matches the scene. And I'm pulling mine back, and I'm getting somewhere around the mid 60s, 65, something like that. I'm going to zoom in on my scene and see how I feel about this a little bit. But this is beginning to seem like this, that this is actually matching my scene just a little bit more. Are you guys good with this? Is this working for you? So now go to your saturation check layer, and you can look at the saturation check layer, and she actually matches the rest of our scene reasonably well. I don't know that there's a real saturation move in that. So I'm not going to actually change the saturation layer here. I'm also going to turn on my color check layer, both of those, to see how well she fits that whole scene. And when I look at it, her skin tone, sort of those yellows and greens are beginning to match this other scene pretty well. The red of her dress is matching the door part pretty well. Again, that's not a saturation move in here. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. If I didn't, I would actually fine tune it doing the same thing we did with the girl in the woods. Does that make sense? All right, last thing, we need to gild the lily here. The thing that's not matching here is the fall off on this whole scene. If you take a look at this, the light's coming all from above, and this is, I've got way too much darkness that's sitting down here below. So I'm going to fix that. On top of the gradient map that I just made, I'm going to add an empty blank layer. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it a really large brush. I'm going to make it a completely soft brush, so total softness. I'm going to make sure that black is my foreground color, and you want to make this brush as large. What you want to do here is you want the center of the brush, where it's going to be its most intense, to be at the bottom of her dress. And you want the fall off, which is the edge of the brush, to be where do you really want your fall off to start? I want my fall off to start pretty much at her stomach. That's where I want it to fall off. So I need a bigger brush still. So I'm going to bring this all the way up about like this. So the center of my brush is at the bottom of her feet. I've got this all the way at the top here. I'm simply going to click once. And that did nothing because I've got a flow of 2. Command Z to undo that. Take my flow all the way back up to 100% and try that again. Click, and it drops it down and puts this big black stain underneath her, which is fine. It also puts it on the whole scene. You need to clip this layer to just the figure. So again, hover your cursor right between that thing that we just made and the layer right below it. Hold down the Option key and click. Now that whole darkness is actually just put on the bottom of her skirt. But it's black paint. We need to change the blending mode of this to multiply. It's a little too dark for me, so I'm actually going to drop the luminosity off of this a little bit more to pull it back. Even a little bit more. And I'm feeling a little bit better about that. I feel like this part's pretty good. I feel like the bottom part needs to be a little bit darker. So I'm actually going to add another blank layer. Again, I'm going to clip it. I'm going to make my brush smaller now because now I want it to start at the very bottom of her feet, but only go right below probably the flowers. I'm going to do the same trick again. One click, that's it. Change the blending mode to multiply and drop the opacity. And then finally, the thing that we're really missing on this, I'm going to slide all the way down to the background layer. I'm going to click on the background layer. I'm going to add a blank layer in between, and I'm going to call this Shadow 1. And say OK. Hit the G key to get the gradient tool. My gradient is still set up for the shadows we were doing before. Click and drag down, hit Command T to actually get the transform dialog box, hold down the Option key, crush this thing and bring it underneath her feet because it would be actually in there. Go ahead and hit, I'm going to make it a little bit narrower, it's a little too wide. Good, and go ahead and hit the Enter key like that. Double click on the hand. Are you fucking kidding me? So I look at this as possibly the most complex thing we'll ever do in this class, but I also look at this as my gift to you. If you embrace this, if you use this, you don't even have to learn it, you just need to remember to go to the PDF. Look at what we just did. Are there questions about this? I don't know, guys. I'm fucking excited for you. All right, so we did not get to the how to build a man-made background, so you only need to do the one composite assignment, and I will see you guys next week. Are there questions about any of this? I would just like to mention what time it is, just saying.